Hello and welcome to the Sara Simmonds show. I am really, really excited today because we're going to be talking about how to do good without greenwashing. So I'm joined today by the awesome Anja Rundquist. Anja is the Chief Revenue Officer for an incredible organization called Invest Conservation. And I myself, Sara Simmonds, am CEO at the Impact Innovator, which is a mastermind specifically designed for purpose-led business owners to be able to launch their companies and scale. And we work with business owners from $0 to $50 million. And how we help them is through building and showcasing for them a sustainable growth system, which I'm going to dive into as we go through today. Now, I would love to invite anyone today here to follow the Sara Simmonds page and sign up to the Impact Innovator newsletter, where I share weekly tips on how you can grow your company and make simple sales growth and impact growth one step at a time. We've put that in the chat for you now. So let's dive in. Anja, welcome. We met a few months ago in real life, and I'm in London and you're in Sweden, and we both work with business owners all over the world. And we were really lucky to be invited to the Green Tech Conference and also a global organization. And Anja, we bonded over our shared mission to, rather than like talking about doing good, actually get on and do it. So would you like to introduce yourself and share anything about what you felt when we met? And then let's dive in.
Yeah, I mean, we had such a great energy just after that conference, sitting, talking about like the setups that a lot of things evolve around the high level top talk, but what actually doing and the people around in our networks as well is actually there to dig in and do the things and actually getting to that. And how can we share some of those points on how do you go beyond that? How do you avoid a lot of these fears that are out of like, what if I get it wrong? What if I don't do the right thing? And that's really like, so, I mean, from Invest Conservation, we are a mission-driven company. We are founded and set up to bring money into conservation. And that means protecting the most threatened species in the world from going extinct. So that's the whole mission of our company. That's what we're bringing together. But of course, this wasn't where we both started the journey, right? Like we have come a long way before we set part of these
Absolutely.
kind of journeys. And I think that was kind of where we really found that synergy as well. Like we both been in large corporations, we both been in driving and setting up, and how can you get to this and how can you enable more of that impact and what actions can actually be done from that side.
Yeah, totally. So over the next 40 minutes, what Anja and I are going to do is talk about three key areas. The first, as Anja just shared, we're going to dive into like the corporate world and what we saw going wrong in the corporate world from a greenwashing point of view, that we felt, yeah, we need to create purpose-led companies that actually do good without greenwashing. And we hope that the tips we share will be useful for the corporate companies joining us today. The second thing we're going to talk about is how we have been part of and launched ourselves award-winning purpose-led companies. So for purpose business owners joining today, we can share a roadmap of how you can actually get on and scale a purpose-led company that does real good. And the third thing we're going to talk about is our systems, mine for helping business owners with sustainable growth, and Anja's in Invest Conservation for helping the companies that Anja works with actually do good without greenwashing. And we're going to share success stories of, real takeaways in doing good without greenwashing, so that we hope that by the end of this live, you've got some real nuggets on those three key areas. So let's dive in. So yeah, Anja, what did you see in the corporate world when you were working that you thought, gosh, I have to, this isn't working anymore? This is corporates, like, I don't know, making promises is sort of that isn't really making big change, and you felt you wanted to do things differently.
I think for me, it was like I always had that passion for being in kind of the sustainability world. And I think it's wonderful to see the most generations now have, right? So that kind of is inhabited in us very early on. I'm Swedish as well, where nature is very prevalent to where we're coming from. We grow up in it and so on. But I worked in large corporations and I also worked in some startups where I felt that although sustainability was actually at the forefront, what we got stuck doing was calculations. So we got stuck measuring data, looking at data, kept going through different frameworks, but I didn't see the actual change. And I didn't see that actually coming through in the impact where I mean, we've all seen enough of this, like the earth is burning, right? There is catastrophic events happening all around us. And we were sitting calculating data down to 4 decimal points. And it was model data and model data. And it is good, like you need to measure things as well, but measure doesn't translate into actions. And what I was missing in a lot of these things was action. And I started getting really kind of itchy, like I need to do more. This is not the way we're driving. And of course, regulation is good. It forces companies to do things, but it can't be stifling. It can't be that the things that we're doing is looking at how we fit into a framework instead of looking at what is our actual business, where is our impact, and how do we reduce that impact? How do we then go the next step and also conserve what we have? We only have one planet, and we need to conserve that as we are working. So what I did there, I also went into some of the startups world, and I saw that sometimes the focus was very much on growing headcount, but I wanted to see the impact that the company was doing. And when I met the other founding team at Invest Conservation, and it's really about seeing how do we protect these species. Like in some of the projects we work with, there is 100 adults left of that species, and they can't go below that. We need to mobilize that money now. It's such a tremendous impact, and we can all be part of that. And then what's kind of stopping in that often is that fear of greenwashing. How do we go beyond that? So for me, it was really going from these mega large companies in some cases that has the pockets to do tremendous things, but it still got stuck very much on calculations and reporting and a little bit of philanthropy on the side that could look good in a sustainability report. But I would like to see it be the foundation of the company.
Totally agree. I love what you shared. Measuring something doesn't mean action, doesn't mean real on the ground impact. And I totally get it. And you know, I think like that's what I hear as well from many people working within sustainability within the corporate space. There's so much, you know, calculations, data, and measuring being done, you know, to tick a box and do a spreadsheet and report to the board. But what action is being done? So I love that that's what drove you to pivot and say, no, I want to go and work with an amazing purpose-led business, which we're going to dive into. I was so inspired when I first met you and heard about Invest Conservation. We're going to dive into that in a minute. My background in the corporate world comes from the consumerism space. So I worked for over 15 years as a head buyer, product innovator, and expert in consumer buying behavior for global retailers in London and around the world. And as far back as 2006, I guess it was my training in consumer buying behavior that made me see, hold on a minute, there's a lot of, you know, emperor's new clothes going on, fakeness in the world of what we sell. And I felt that the drive to be constantly saying to consumers, buy more, wasn't sustainable. And when I saw corporates saying that they cared about a sustainable world, I saw seasons speed up, more and more products in the market, more and more waste. 99% of what we buy ends in landfill within 6 months. This is not sustainable. We spend $49 trillion on stuff a year. And as a buyer, I know that 80% of any company's sales come from 20% of what it makes. And that also applies to products or services. So I was saying to myself, when I saw these showrooms stuffed full of stuff, we don't need this much stuff. And it's wrong to be pushing it onto the consumer. So I also really felt from a corporate point of view, customers can feel authenticity and they can also feel fake. They can feel if a company is faking really caring about making an impact. So I also saw, and since then have seen, corporates saying that they care about sustainability, they care about being a socially conscious business, yet the investment that they make into sustainability is like, 0.1% of collections, 0.1% they'll say of a budget to sell products that are sustainable. That isn't enough. That for me is greenwashing. We need to be making change where like everything is made responsibly. And we need to cut back on what we make to really hone in every company to make sure that the 20% is all that they're really selling to the customer, not the waste that goes with it. And if we can do that, we can transform the $49 trillion of stuff to good stuff for people and planet. And that's where my mission came from. So I set out to work out how we can build purpose-led companies. And that is really challenging, that actually do good without greenwashing. But I found a roadmap to do it, as I know you did too. So is there anything you want to ask me?
Do you want to share a bit, Sara? Like, because I think this is also very fascinating sometimes, because when you do take the jump over to kind of the impact world and you leave a bit of the safety net of the kind of the you go out and trailblaze, right? And what I see around me as well, that you start finding other entrepreneurs and other setups that are really driving this. But one of the challenges that many of them have is when they do this kind of like the 20% you're talking about, like they go in and they do the kind of the sustainability product, is breaking in and actually turning the sales around on that and scaling that, because there is a market, right? We know there is a lot of people around us that do want that sustainability product. How have you worked with firms and setups to help them scale on that journey? Because I think there is so much good setups coming out there that also drown sometimes and don't get attention.
Absolutely. I would say most drown. And how I realize that was in my own journey, I realized what was important through developing a purpose-led business myself. The most important thing is to focus as much energy on innovation as how to sell and market the product. And what I see in purpose-led companies is they focus 99.9% of their attention on raising money and on innovation without figuring out who is the right customer to sell this to and how do we market and sell that. So what I do with purpose-led business owners is firstly really simplify their business. So when we're innovating something new, it's complicated. And to be able to sell and scale that to any customer around the world, simplicity is really, really important. So, for example, I'm wearing this jumper today from one of
I love it. It's so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an amazing brand and founder, a lady called Carol, who is the founder of Showcase, which is this company, and they're the #1 responsible yak wool brand globally. So I started working with Carol a couple of years ago. She joined my mastermind program. And the first thing I help founders do is simplify that positioning so they can be category leader. So when we become category leader, automatically we can sell more. We can then build a greater impact. And with Carol's journey, how that's worked into reality, when we position Carol as the #1 responsible yak wool brand and business globally, it enabled Carol to attract global attention and thought leadership. This enabled Carol to actually be asked to set the standard in animal welfare for yaks. It enabled Carol to be the preferred fiber supplier for our cat. And it has enabled Carol to, and her company Showcase, to massively increase their sales and be seen and worn by Asia's top influencers. And the first step I work with a business is on the positioning. The second step is on their offer, finding that 20% that is going to deliver the 80%. And this is one of them, Anja. Like, what I help business owners do is build a visual appeal. So when we're online businesses today, we need to have a strong visual appeal. Then we get noticed. So that's the second part I help business owners do. This jumper has helped Carol build then her thought leadership and attract amazing partnerships, which is the third part of what I help business owners do. How can you build sustainable sales growth organically? And I do that by really encouraging them to build visual appeal, brands, offers, businesses, and then attract global partnerships. And the results for Carol have been, as I said, an amazing increase in sales, which has enabled Carol to give jobs and support 4,000 yak families, yak herder families within the Tibet regions. So this is where my journey to be able to simplify purpose, businesses, to be able to help them focus on what I call they do that it's a hero offer, and then be able to figure out how to sell and market it to the right people who will appreciate it, buy it, and then through that, they make amazing impact in real numbers.
No, I think that's wonderful, because I think that's often where, it is actually getting the channeling out, because there is a lot of people with wonderful focus and setups, but then they might need the help to actually get the impact of that work they're doing. And I also like very much what you bring in there, that you focus on what is the actual core of that, rather than trying to tag it on to become sustainability. It's built on the foundation of sustainability, and that becomes what you're doing, keeping that as the kind of the star of that. Because, for example, in our case, in our company, we were set up because we saw there was a gap in how we could protect the world. Like, carbon markets and setups, philanthropy hasn't actually led into protecting the resources that we need to produce all of the materials and setups and goods, but it's been depleting, so that, it's a very consuming world right now, and we don't really protect what we have around that. So it's often that also the protection of the nature in, and our company was, hence that's the name of the company, is Invest Conservation. Is bringing investments into conservation, because there's been a lot of focus on tree planting and restoration, and that's great. But like a house, you need to make sure you keep the roof on, right? You can't just remove it and then think you restore it or put technology and try to refix everything. So in our company, the key focus with everything we do is investment into conservation. And that means our leading star is the money should go into conservation, and then we need to unlock everything else around that. And that means 85% of every dollar that comes into us have to go to on-the-ground conservation efforts. And that's high compared even to NGOs and setup. But how to do that then is looking at, because when I came in, like I was used to working with very big financial institutions and setups, and there is a lot of capital going around. And then when you come into the world of how do we protect nature, the things that often come up with corporate is, we're a little bit afraid of greenwashing. We're not sure if we can go in and do this. Like, would that be greenwashing if we protect this? Aren't we just trying to get, like, because nowadays it's been the challenge of greenwashing, companies overstating what they're doing. And then you have the other side, which is companies don't dare to do anything more. And like, what do I dare to do? I have set aside, even for larger companies, when they say I've put science-based targets on my reductions and my setup, I can't do this. Yes, you can. You have to protect the natures there.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I remember, like, when I met you, and you were on the Green Tech stage, and you were doing the amazing presentation about the work that Invest Conservation is doing on the ground in the rainforest. And it was so inspiring. I would love to ask you, like, what are you doing differently in terms of those real projects that, like others sort of say it's a carbon offset, it could be like it's not doing real good. What is Invest Conservation doing differently?
I think one of the key things that we are, because people are like, oh, are you a project developer? Are you a setup? And actually, no, we are almost acting as an agent for conservation groups and for local indigenous groups and communities to be able to enable that money that needs to come in. Because if you look at the carbon project, normally it has to be that it's about to be deforested right now to get a carbon credit. So imagine a local indigenous group or a conservation group that done really good work for 5 years. They can't really access capital from carbon credits in that sense because they get penalized for having done a good job. But actually, they should be rewarded because what the nature is providing is also a service. Like the standing forest, if you look at this picture behind me, this is one of
Yeah,
our projects in Ecuador.
amazing.
And that forest, by just standing there, absorb carbon the whole time. That's a natural carbon sink. And what we're doing is helping overcome that fear of how can I invest in this and feel confident in that? Because often firms don't have the in-house resources. How will you know it's a good project or not? I like friends of mine that are sustainability manager, I get inundated with different requests and I don't know how to distinguish what's a good project. And I have so much to do on my reporting in an Excel spreadsheet. So how can I do that? And we help with that. So in our team, we have our CEO, John Rogers, who worked with forestry for over 17 years. We have Dr. Martin Schaffer, who's been a conservationist for 30 years. And it's really based on science, selecting these really good projects where you make a difference. So how we select projects is we go in biodiversity hotspots. And just to explain what that is, that means where you have the highest threat levels of biodiversity, protecting it. So imagine this, 2.5% of land holds 43% of life. Imagine the impact that we can't let go. But how do we then help that companies that saying, okay, we help you with selection of project, the quality assurance that these projects are high integrity because there have been cowboy projects out, right? And that's why the market is scared. The Guardian articles, the setup, people have tried to do good going into projects and they might have not been high integrity. So it's almost like people saying it's easier to fly under the radar and do nothing than getting hanged out in media for doing it wrong. So it's almost like where no good deeds goes unpunished was a quote I'm just taking from another gentleman. It's not mine, but I think that resonates sometimes. So what we're helping then, and why we were kind of like Green Tech Festival is using our projects, it also is because they can see that independent data verification over. So we always work with the local conservation group, indigenous groups on the ground, but that's the traditional model. We overlay that. So we have satellite for carbon, so you can see how much it actually is. If it's larger projects, we put up flux towers. You can actually measure the carbon real time going through in the atmosphere. How much is the forest actually absorbing by just standing there? And for biodiversity, we're using camera traps. That's quite standard in a lot of projects, so it's nothing completely novel with that, but also soundscape. So for example, Dr. Martin Schaffer, who is on our board, and also he's the CEO of Fundación Yokotoco, which is where you can see these projects here. They have done a study of 2 years where they use AI analysis of soundscapes. So you actually train the AI to listen into the sounds, and this gets like you're leveraging really smart technology to start proving what nature is already doing. The nature does it. It's just that we as humans need to see it proven, independent data, independent technology. And we overlay that. So you can actually listen in, you can go down to moth level. It's super, super fascinating. Anyone interested, we can share the science articles.
I can
But then we
share.
capture that. And we help also with the data that you need for sustainability reporting, because that's the other thing, like what can we show? And the thing here that I think is very key for a company where they say, okay, this is all great, and we know that it's a high integrity project, it won't bite us, because I think that's a fear that many people have. But the next thing here is, how do you kind of go, then how do I link that to my business? So like you said with the yak, it's very like, it's so specific, and I love how they like kind of tie that into like, this is how, and this is the livelihoods we create from that. How do I link protecting nature? Am I not just getting a ticket? Isn't this an offset? Am I not just buying myself free?
Yeah.
No, you're not buying yourself free. This is the thing. You need to protect nature, but you need to reduce your impact. There's always an and in everything. You need to reduce the negative impact that you have to your supply chain. You're not buying yourself free from that. But investing in nature, you have to do at the same time. So this is always an and equation. And I think the focus in the market has been so much it's either or. No, because if you think of, I was actually sitting with a wonderful lady the other day, and we were looking at the business as usual curve. If you just do business as usual, And then you go in and trying to reduce your negative impact. You get to a certain point, and then you think that, oh, maybe I can use 10% to protect, or maybe use carbon or whatever. But hang on a second, that scale, the actual transition available in the market today isn't there to do all the green transition that you need to do. And what happens if nature disappears? So these studies that comes out says that 50% of GDP is directly dependent on nature. Okay, let's say that, but we all know, everyone on this call knows that 100% are indirectly dependent on nature. Because if you can't drink water, you can't even talk to me right now. We wouldn't be sitting here. You would be focusing on how do I not die of thirst? And that's a service we don't even pay for. We go to the tap, depending on which country you're sitting in, and pour ourselves a glass of water. But if that doesn't happen, doesn't matter if you're a service firm, not a productive firm either. We are all dependent on nature, and we need to protect that.
Yeah, 100%. So what I hear from you is it's all about practical, on the ground, looking for real projects that you can have a tangible outcome.
Yes.
If you want to do good without greenwashing, it's about beyond measurement. It's about actually taking the measurement. That's great, like you said, but we need to go and invest in projects that are, you know, like you're saying, when I met you, and the soundscape you mentioned is like you can measure biodiversity by the AI seeing all the different, hearing all the different animals in the rainforest and knowing how the protection is going by the different animals that they do hear or don't hear. Is that right?
And you can actually hear different levels, and you can hear how long the singing is in the morning indicates a healthy forest or not.
Wow.
So you have a lot of these measures that the nature is doing, and the nature's been doing this the whole time. So one of my thing is like, of course we should focus on innovation. I think tech, I came from a financial tech background kind of as well. So I find tech fascinating, and I think tech is enabling, but the tech is actually just helping us tell what the nature is doing. And I think that's kind of, we can't wait for perfect, we need to protect. But I think another part as well that we're seeing is that often firms want to have it very close to what is close to their own setup. So for example, we're working with a wonderful organization in the Philippines as well, that have a project there as well that we initially created for another organization because they had setups in Manila for a service firm. And they said that if we want to go and do this, we want to do it where it's close to our employees so that our employees can also feel that we try to go in and protect in the areas that they're living in. So it makes a difference where they're at. And I think that's kind of also going from just the reporting, start going into where does this link to my business? Where do we make a difference? And I think that's one thing that I see as well in Europe, that we're very good at talking about things, but we need to get to the action. So, for example, I was at New York Climate Week, and I asked a lot of the large corporate, when I meet someone, I say, so what do you do about biodiversity? Open-ended question. And most of them say, oh, we're looking at TNFD. And if someone not familiar with it, this is a new framework on disclosure for nature. And you start looking at your materiality and you're looking at your impact. Most firms know the materiality. You know what impact you have. So you would already know where you need to start. You might not know your exact numbers, but you know if you're a cement company, you know what you make an impact. If you are a fashion brand, you know what your wool is coming from and so on. But I spoke to a Costa Rica real estate firm, and I thought it was wonderful because I asked them, what do you do about biodiversity? And the sustainability manager there goes, oh, we have GPS trackers on the birds in our conservation reserves. And it's like, because I assumed that's what you meant. And that shift of like, there was action. He wasn't talking about it because he just assumed, like, of course we do the frameworks, but this is the action. And I asked him, how did you get your board on board to do this? And he looked at me a little bit perplexed and said, but this is Costa Rica. We live here. We see it. We are a real estate company. We know that we destroy nature in a certain extent, and we need to protect nature. And our CEO is part of releasing the birds with us. And I don't quite understand your question, because like you were saying, what I experience with a lot in Europe is how do you get the board with you if you're on a larger company to actually see the importance of this when you haven't put a financial value on nature.
Yeah, but there's a financial value on your customers' loyalty. And what I see, and Harvard Business Review have shared, purpose-driven companies are growing 10% faster than non-purpose-driven companies. As opposed to also, if we look at traditional sectors like the luxury industry sector is declining really for one of the first times ever. It's down 2% this year. And this is because, as I said earlier, okay, board members might be looking at the financial bottom line, but the customer is looking at, what is the company doing? Do I want to buy from this company? Do I believe in this company? And they're voting. Do I believe in the company? Do I need this? Do I need this product or service? And the customers are voting with the dollar. And then they're taking, and investing their money into like amazing innovation-led companies that are doing good, whether that's a health tech company like my Aura Ring, whether that's like clothing businesses like Patagonia, Tony's Chocolonely. People are voting. So people care. And what I think we're talking about today is, as well, it's this theme of making a real difference. And I would say as well, yes, some businesses are more simple. Like you said, if it's like a yak wool brand that I work with from beginning to end, that's a traceable chain. Other businesses are more complex. But as you mentioned, like real estate, which is, not so straightforward. You're saying that when you went to Costa Rica, they're innovating. They're innovating new solutions. And I think as business owners, you can say it's difficult to like get to real full transparency of what's going on in my business, but it's also your responsibility to really understand what's going on. Because again, if I look at my traditional background in the clothing industry, the challenges within clothing is like, say, the outsourcing, like in a global billion-dollar company, something will be outsourced and then outsourced and then outsourced. You can't get to the actual root of where the fiber is coming from, but you actually can if you really start to say and set an intention as a company owner. I want to do that. Like for myself, when I left the corporate world back in 2006-07, I left to create one of the world's first fully sustainable jeans brands. What I did, Anja, was go to the root, to the fiber as the starting point and say, well, I want this to be an organic cotton. But, organic cotton itself is environmentally sustainable, but not socially sustainable. So then I said, I want to make it organic and fair trade. That's the root. And that's something that few business owners were doing because they used, saying organic for a marketing point of view or greenwashing, but something isn't actually making an impact unless we look at environmental and social as one. So it comes back to, as a business owner myself, as an entrepreneur myself, if I can do it, if I can go to the root and say, right, I want to make something organic, fair trade, then naturally made, then made by hand, then offsetting all the carbon, and then looking at like a garment inside out, like at the zip, at the pocketing, at the buttons, at the stitching, to make sure everything is sustainable, to make sure everything is good for people and planet. If I can do it as one individual, then the corporates can do it. And it's like, so we're coming together, like, these different sides of our experience, but it's like, it's making good decisions and then taking our investment and putting them into positive, real action, like you guys at Invest Conservation are doing.
And I think that resonates very much with kind of the example of greenwashing, when you just slap a logo on to something to try to kind of
like
claim
organic.
that without actually having that underfunded. That is greenwashing. And yes, regulation should be clamping on that as it starts doing, right? And misleading claims that we've seen where people try to make something seem sustainability, but it's quite obvious it's not, right? That's right. That should be clamped down on. But one thing that really resonates with me with what you're saying is that kind of authenticity inside of how do you build that? So one experience that I really loved in my corporate life, but this was actually, I worked with her in a setup where she had just been bought up and she was part of funding a company, and wonderful woman. She actually was part of funding that when she was 55 years old. And this was a financial information setup, so it wasn't production, but she brought her authentic person as a founder to that company. And everything we did, every morning she woke up, and we used to travel together because I was one of the first employees client facing in Europe, and then we built up sales team and we built up all the setups, but it was her and me in the beginning. And we traveled around, and every morning she says, Anja, look at me. If I die tomorrow, and bless her heart, unfortunately, she died in cancer. But she said, if I'll die tomorrow, remember this, you never go wrong doing right. You never go wrong doing right. That should lead you in everything you do. If you do it with the best intention, you might get certain things wrong, but you're doing it for the right reasons. And if something doesn't feel right, don't do it. Because we had situations, and this was prior to the Me Too whole wave of that, and I was a young woman at that point in a financial world, which was very male dominated. And we had situations where today they would have been brought up to a level that that point they weren't. And I could come back and saying, this is a potentially one of really large clients. And she said, but you look upset. What happened? No, something, they made some comments that made me feel very uncomfortable as a woman. Like that was, and she's like, then we're not going to have them as a client. And I had in my working experience at that point, never had that support, because she was saying, the light is on, our balance sheet is ticking with the good clients we have. And we don't need to bring them on if they can't be respectful. If they think that you are some kind of toy for out promoting our services, that's not the client we want. And we decline that business, and we're perfectly fine doing that. And she brought that, but equally when there was turmoils in the finance market, she gave free services to her clients sometimes, and they all came back because she did everything always for the right reason. And that was underpinning. It wasn't about what is certain regulation saying that you should do. But of course, she was always in the line of it. It's financial information. You have to be very careful. But that wasn't the leading star. She built the business on this is what we stand for. And the clients we had, they knew that because I was out sometimes and they could say, Anja is here. And do you know what? She works for Mary, and Mary is this. And they told her life story. And they told other people, you need to have this service. I didn't even have to, they kind of did that because it was so authentic to what she stood for. And I think when you do business in that foundation and you do that, you build something so beautiful and unique, and every customer can feel it. It's not a CSR report, it's not a sustainability. It is there and it is live, and you're living it, and you can do that. You can, even if you work in a large corporate, you can be that little sunshine within that, that's just bring that authenticity. This is what we're doing, and we're doing it for the right reason. And when it feels wrong, it feels wrong. And then you actually raise your voice. And I've been a bit annoying on that sometimes. But now that helped me also get into a world where I can lead in a company where we are having that as a leading star. We're doing this to protect species from going extinct. This means X, Y, Z.
Yeah. And it's there, it's behind you. And the same with my amazing clients. I don't work with everybody. I choose who I work with because I care that they're making real impact. And, when you talk about amazing, inspiring leaders, someone who's always driven me since my sustainable jeans brand working in India is Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change you want to see in the world. Everybody listening today into our live and who watches after our live, I am so inspired by the idea that and the reality that today we have the biggest opportunity to actually be change makers. Each and every one of us, we have the opportunity, and the way that we are socially connected, digitally connected, we're having this conversation. on the World Wide Web, we can create a massive impact. And we can't bury our head in the sand. You know, we know whatever we're doing, wherever we work, if we are business owners, if we're corporate, if we're entrepreneurs, coaches, consultants, if we're working in an organization, we know if that organization is greenwashing. We know if our actions are greenwashing. We know if they're not. And we need to kind of pull our head out and really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, am I doing my best? Am I doing things in the best way possible? Am I raising my minimum standard 2% every day, which is a principle I live by, for doing good? And the other thing, and if I'm not, why not? And how am I going to do things differently tomorrow? Like, because we can all make that change day by day, and we have to make that change because, you know, we are accountable. We're accountable to ourselves, to each other, to people, and to our planet. So we can't afford to be
And the
pretending.
future people, the ones that are not here yet, because we are actually destroying for things that people don't even have a voice to do.
Yes.
So the generations coming after us, and I think we should really take that wisdom a lot as well from the protectors of the forest that's been living in the forest for many years. It's not ours. We are here to protect and guard it. And what you use from it, you also regrow, and you try to protect that setup, and you try to be. And I think that's just the kind of the setup where sometimes in the Western world, we get paralyzed by, will this be the right? Am I saying the right thing? And I think kind of, because if we want to be very actionable in that as well, is like, don't say something that you can't underpin. Like if you stating that this is organic, like in your example, what are you underpinning that with? Show that and show what you're doing. And if you can show that, that's good. And don't get paralyzed on that sometimes. Like your example is so brilliant where you've gone to source, but some other ones might not have their full supply chain. Then be transparent on that as well. We're working with our top suppliers to drive this change because it has the biggest, and we do what we can with that right now, and then we go next here. But just be very transparent on this is what we're doing, and this is what we're not doing. For customers will actually, I can't remember the firm now, but I saw a brilliant sustainability report where they actually lifted all the things that they weren't doing. And it was so refreshing of actually saying, this is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing.
Yeah.
And then going in and saying, we need to do more than what people are telling us to do. All these 2030, 2050 targets, we all know we're missing them. We are not on the paths for any of these ones. And people are still sitting thinking that 2030 is 6 years away. I mean, I was sitting with carbon discussions 5 years ago, and I haven't seen them move that very far in that period. So time is running, and we do not have that time to be afraid of it not getting it perfect. We need to understand, am I doing the right thing? Is protecting nature a thing that's going to bite me? No, it will never bite you to protect our future. But if you say that's the only thing you're doing, of course you will be accused of greenwashing. If you are polluting all day long and think that because I invested in a project, I am free, it's not your get out of jail free card. It's an investment that you're doing, and you as your firm owner are still responsible for what you're doing in this. But you should do both, because you won't have any resources to bring your company if we don't protect where we're staying right now. And you can, in a beautiful way, also bring your clients. So for example, some things that we are developing more now to do is we use blockchain. So we link like each hectare. But for kind of e-commerce and setups, we're bringing APIs that you can also bring to the products. Like with the products, you protect X number of square meters. And then people say, isn't that a bit like the tree planting setups? No, this is actually bringing the really high integrity projects, but letting your customers also be part of that if you want to. So bring it into live, so it doesn't just become like we put a donation here, this is what we're doing. No, in the regions we're working with, we also want to protect the setups here, because there is a lot of exposure. And, you know, we work in Borneo, for example, their palm oil plantation is a real threat. Orangutans that venture over will get shot and so on. So we work with outreach programs. How do we protect them? How do you work with the neighboring sides to protect these orangutans that if they venture out, they don't actually get shot? So there's a lot of these things. And if you work in those regions, be part of contributing to also that protection, even that you're doing good already. Do more. Let us all collectively try to really preserve, because forests like 300-400-year-olds, you can't just replace them. You can't tree plant that back again if you cut it down. And a lot of it is cut down to make ship woods and verandas in Europe. That's like breaking down a cathedral to make a little cottage. And we're doing that because of financial values. And we need to shift that financial values. And like you say, the consumers are shifting that. And we need to get out of that fast fashion and the setups and the just using into that quality and the sustainability. And then scientifically, you underpin every statement you do. If you underpin it, you're not greenwashing it. But if you just slap things on because you think that increase your sales, well, that will come out and it should come out.
Yeah. And if you underpin it and do it in the way that we've shared today, I know for sure, and I'm sure it's the same for you, the companies that I work with, when they go through this system of simplifying, of authenticity, of streamlining their purpose-led innovation, when they get all that sorted, they are thriving. They are like making 10x the revenues that they were making last year. That's the companies I work with. And people say, but isn't that impossible, Sara, in the uncertain world that we live in? And I say, it's not impossible. It's completely possible. So what the moral of this story is, when you actually, get really clear and you make real impact, really good choices, when you align your business through, you can really thrive because the customer wants this.
Yes. And I think that's really is kind of also, like you were saying, of putting that value in, you will get your value back of that protection and of getting that loyalty from the client and that engagement that they're getting.
100%. I mean, I know, I'm going to be investing in invest conservation, and it's like knowing that I've invested in other amazing organizations where I'm giving and tree planting every month, and that just feels amazing. And I want to buy from companies that are doing great things, great projects, great things, so my money is working for me. And there's growing amount of conscious consumers that are out there. Yes, there are the Sheins of the world, and but there's the massive it's like two ends of the spectrum. And we have to look at, like, if we look at the fast anything way versus the sustainable way, and we look at which companies have much longer longevity, it's those companies, because these companies are making the fast buck. These companies are investing into the future. So I'll bring this to a close now into our conversation, and I'll say, the real takeaways are focus on making a real difference, and to not worry about being perfect and not worry about that fear. Go ahead and do it, but overcome the fear by being transparent, and telling, like you shared, that real story. Okay, we're not perfect. We own our imperfection. So we do this great and we don't do that great. So they're my takeaways. What are the takeaways you sort of want to share, Anja?
No, I think that's the similar things. There is that, like, kind of, there is two streams that needs to happen parallel with any companies. Is that really that internal work, and then also how do we protect our future supply? If we don't protect this, if we don't protect the nature that we live in, because one of the questions that we get sometimes is like, tropical forest is very far away from, like we live in the UK or we live in Switzerland or, the Nordics and so on. Why would we do something like here? And it's that the world is interconnected. Like you talked about the India setups, and any firm has a supply chain. If you have any kind of production, and if not, you're sitting in an office and you're sitting on a chair, where did that chair come from? Everyone is in a supply chain, and that supply chain has global impact. And if we don't protect the tropical forest, for example, when I was little, my son is 8-year-old, he still learned this in school. Our CEO thinks it's cringe when I say it, but I will say it anyway because I believe in this very much, and the science too, is that the tropical forest is the lungs of the earth. So this is actually a natural carbon sink, and if we don't, and it has impact on rain cycles, which means climate impacts across the globe. So something far away has impact on what's happening in Europe. Something that is also like global warming, the trees that are this big, while in Europe they're this small. You can walk in the forest, you can't walk in some of the tropical forests. They're so tense and they absorb so much carbon. And we need to protect that, even if that is not the doorstep we have, that impacts your life, it impacts my life. And we need to be global in our mindset of what we're working and what we're doing. Every business today is global. Even if you're saying, actually, I'm local and I have this, well, even if you're baking bread, where did the corn come from? Where did the wheat come from? Where is your stove coming from? Everything has a global supply chain impact. And if you don't protect the world globally, you won't be able to have a sustainable business either, because we'd have to have that world to live in to do that too. So it's
Absolutely.
both. Like mine is always and. You should do and. Do your internal, what you can do within your firm, and make sure that you protect so your firm has a place to continue striving in.
Absolutely. Thank you. We have a couple of questions. So one for you. What are the key geographies your company works in Vest Conservation, and what are the biggest challenges to overcome?
We work in what we call biodiversity hotspots. So there is a map, actually, I can share that after, but it's a wonderful map where you can see from the IUCN, it's in the Conservation International term initially. And that's where you have the most threatened. So it's like a hotspot. So today we have live projects in Ecuador, which is like you have 10% of the bird species in the world there. It's super amazing there. We have projects in Indonesia, so in Borneo, developing more in Sumatra. We have in Philippines. Brazil is next, where we're going really large in. But we can develop projects anywhere along that line that we call biodiversity hotspots and tropical forests. And then if it has a real conservation value, we can go sometimes outside of that as well, if that's something that your firm need help with. In relation to the biggest challenge, and this was when I came from like finance and sustainability background, I actually thought that sales in my line of business would be very easy, because I was used to doing large deal sizes on technology and people don't really blink that much, is that people are so afraid of getting it wrong. And that's the kind of where we are going in. Why, like, if that fear wasn't there and people channel directly into NGOs and so on, maybe our organization wouldn't be there. But that is what we're helping to overcome, is that greenwashing fear, the lack of resources to get into that, so that companies can actually feel confident that you can invest in these projects. And we will give you the independent data so you can verify it. You get use of funds, you get reporting. And in some of them, if we go into Papua, maybe we shouldn't recommend you. Like there's certain regions, sometimes you have to, but even so, but for example, in Ecuador, there is wonderful lodges in the reserves as well. You can go and visit and experience firsthand what you're actually contributing to. But I think that one of the challenges we have is the greenwashing fears that has kind of stifled the market because there's been cowboys in it.
100%. And I love, this is why, I bonded with you as well when I first met you and heard you, Anja, because I just knew, and listening to you, that Invest Conservation is doing real on the ground great work and great impact. So thank you for sharing. And we have another question. This directed at me. Organic cotton not necessarily is more sustainable than regular cotton. In the processing of such cotton, there might be more chemicals, and the footprint to bring it to a minimum quality standard that might jeopardize all the complexity and improvements made at the farm level. This is a great question, or great point. And my background comes from the textile industry, and I think it's actually my ability to the root of like technical, from a product, exactly as this Fabrizio is saying, like from the raw ingredient of a product, from whichever product, it's like what happens on the rest of its journey. And when today I work with businesses across 12 different sectors, across every product sector. I work with e-commerce businesses, digital marketing businesses, textile businesses, beauty businesses, energy businesses, all sorts of different businesses. And this question and this point on organic cotton, it actually applies to every single business, because it's the essence of greenwashing. It's going back to that point where I said getting to the root of anything that we make. Any product, any service that we make, any shop that we have, any marketing company we have, and saying, right, We need to look at each point in what we do, what we make, and make sure that it is doing good, real good. So because people can tell, you know, the customer can tell, like we said, organic, yeah, it can, Fabrizio, be poisoned. Like if you're making chocolate, you can start with like an ethical fair trade cocoa bean, but what happens in the rest of the supply chain? If you're making a beauty product, it's the same thing. We have to look basically from beginning to end. And when it comes back to the point when I said how I'm able to help purpose-driven business owners today is because I've done it myself. And, you know, back to the jeans example, I didn't finish the story and Fabrizio's brought it up, right? So it's organic cotton, fair trade cotton. What did I do next? I solved what Fabrizio shared. I thought, yeah, I could dye. How do I dye the cotton? Okay, well, chemical dyeing, not indigo dyeing, just counterbalances that point, the organic and the fair trade. So I sought out and found natural indigo dyeing companies. Then how do I make it into an item of clothing? Well, do I use machines? I actually handmade the jeans. Then how and I worked, sorry, I didn't. I worked with handloom associations that specialize in hand making jeans. And then, you know, when I took the fabric, I had to ship it to Italy. I carbon offset that journey. Then when I went to Italy, I went and worked with finishers of denim and said, this must be finished without chemicals in the finishing process. It must be eco finished. And then I looked at the yarn, and then I looked at the pocketing and the buttons, and everything was eco-finished. So the point is what I said earlier, right? If I can do it as a single-minded entrepreneur, then every business owner can do it. It's, you know, nothing is so complex.
And I think actually there, Sara, it's really inspiring to see what you're doing, because one of the things that often is on panels and events is that larger corporate says we can't do this because we don't get the sustainability premium. But you have proven, right, that you can do this. You can actually, with both your clients, with the jumpers you're wearing, with the jeans that you've created, you can actually have this product. It's not about going the cheapest and trying to, like, people are a little bit too much. How much is that sustainability premium worth? Well, you've shown that you can do it, right?
Let me share a great point on that. Yeah, price is a big part of the sustainability equation. And, you know, we can't get away from the, as I said, the Sheins of this world, the like the fastness and all the cheapness. But on the flip side, I really, the businesses I work with them a lot on pricing, because you can't be more expensive. My goal with the purpose-driven businesses I work with is to make them the same, if not a better price than their competitors. And then the secret to building sustainable growth and sales growth isn't to try to sell to everybody. It's to find, not try, I have a method to do it, to find the right niche of customers that value you. And when you, again, have that alignment, you've really built a unique positioning, you build an offer of a really visual, amazing product or service, and then you find a really good price for it. That, like, I'm working with a beauty conscious skincare brand that's about to launch in the US right now. And they've just been in my mastermind, and they've been, you know, waiting 3 years to raise investment, and they haven't been able to because they didn't know how to simplify their innovation to sell it into investors. Within 90 days of working with me, they've raised over $160,000 of their investment round, which is just phenomenal. Why? Because they're able to simply explain the benefits of their product. And we've worked really closely on really figuring out the right pricing for this. And I've helped them engineer their product so that when they started with me, they were more expensive than the competition. And you just can't be that. In the secret to growth, sustainable growth, for purpose-led businesses leading to sustainable impact is about getting your pricing really like aligned, and then finding the customers who value you, not trying to sell to everybody. And when you do that, like, the growth is amazing. Like I said, you can grow in the worst of times, in the most uncertain of times. And this is, I get very excited about it because this is the opportunity in the online world, right? We have billions of customers. The trick is to follow a system and a process to actually align our businesses so we find exactly the right customers who are going to value us, who we sell them a great product and service at a great price, not cheap, not expensive, great value for great delivery, and then the world is our oyster. So then we can do maximum good and create maximum impact.
That's wonderful. And I think a lot of people needed to hear that. So I hope you can help a lot of companies on that journey, because that is a thing that comes up on and on again in different forums. And
Which
I think you
thing?
made that very well.
The pricing, which bit?
The pricing, the sustainability premium pricing that they say they can't compete. And I think you covered that very well.
And the thing I think is a really important point that I feel really passionately about sharing is that, like, people say to me, purpose-driven business owners, well, you know, it's the customer. The customer we need to educate the customer. And I'll say this again and again, we can't change the mindset of the global customer, because that's been like, it's biological. It's like as old as time itself. It's not up to the customer. It's up to the business owner to develop an amazing product or service that is purpose-driven, that is sustainable, that does do good without greenwashing at an amazing price. And then when you get that aligned, literally you really, really sell. The other week on this show, the Sara Simmonds show, I was interviewing one of the co-founders of Cheeky Panda, which is a bamboo personal hygiene brand, like creating toilet paper and tissues from bamboo. And they're doing 10 million plus in sales. How? Exactly this strategy. When Chris and his wife developed the brand, they thought with this mindset, create a product like for like that is sustainable, that is the same pricing as the non-sustainable toilet tissue out there. They are number one on Amazon in sales. So this is the secret formula for success today as a purpose-led business. So I think we better wrap up because we're 15 minutes over our 45. So I want to just end by saying, like, if anyone wants to book a clarity call with me, we're dropping in the chat like a booking link. And, you know, this is for purpose-led business owners that want to scale, that want to know the system for sustainable growth. And I'm excited to connect with you. And if anyone wants to connect with Anja as well, like, send Anja a DM. This is going to be a video recording. You'll be able to reach Anja on LinkedIn. You can also connect with me and I can put you in touch with Anja. And we're really excited to, you know, further this conversation and to help people do good without greenwashing. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And we look forward to helping if you have biodiversity and carbon goals that we can support with. And it's been such a pleasure, Sara, to speak with you, and very great questions as well. So thank you so much for this time.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care and I'll see you soon. Anja, sending you love. Bye. Bye, everyone.